Opposite colored bishop endings have a very large drawish tendency. Same colored bishops endings also have already a drawish tendency, but here it is much more extreme. They have the largest drawish tendency of all theoretical endgames. If the defender manages to dig in securely on squares of the color which his bishop controls, then there often nothing can be done. As the bishop the attacking bishop has no influence at all. And Zugzwang is also not such a sharp weapon against the bishop. Against a knight, Zugzwang is much, much sharper. As the bishop can stay on one diagonal often forever. And then Zugzwang will be useless. Okay, and there's a guideline. If one side has two passed pawns, the other side has no pawns at all, then if the pawns are separated by 2 files or less, like in this case of Böge Kotlerman, Archangelsk 1948, then the position is a draw, with the exception of 2 bishops' pawns, which can be not stopped on one and the same diagonal. Then the 2 bishop pawns will win. This is the big exception to this part of the guideline. But here, a B and an E pawn, which are securely blockaded, cannot win. And okay, one important point should still be made. Let me go to the position. This is a critical moment. Black is threatening king a1 and winning. So the pawn, white must take aim at the pawn, a typical strategy for bishops to fight against pawns. And here to stop black's king from gaining too much space. This is an important moment. This you must know as well. Only then you can be sure to defend this kind of position. And the last move of the game was very important again. Black is threatening b2, so bishop f5. And bishop b1, and this is a fortress. In here, of course, the computers have the table basis, but with more pawns, humans might be even, in some cases, better than the computers, because the humans have the better understanding of the nature of the concept of an eternal fortress. But in this case, of course, the computer has its endgame table basis, and so it's better than humans because it knows the value of all positions, the theoretical value. Okay, so if the pawns are separated by 2 files or less, then the position is usually a draw. If it's not an C and an F pawn, which cannot be stopped on one and the same diagonal, the 2 bishop pawns will win. The big exception to this part of the guideline, and you should know this motive as well. It's not enough just to blockade and wait or on one diagonal or whatever forever, but you must take aim at the pawn in the right moment and then switch diagonals again at the right moment. Okay, now comes the next part of the guideline. If the pawns are separated by 3 files or more, then they win if they cannot be stopped on one and the same diagonal, but it's not the case here. The C pawn has already crossed the last stopping diagonal of the G pawn, so this is not the case here. And of course, if it's not one wrong rook's pawn which can be stopped by the king, then this would also be a draw, of course. But in almost all other cases, the 2 passed pawns win if they are separated by 3 files or more. This is the general guideline. And C4 would lead to a non-trivial exception to the guideline. Here it's a draw. But C4 is a very unfortunate move, of course. This allows white's king to close the door, and the bishop on A6 is so badly placed that this is a non-trivial exception to the guideline. Chess is such a rich and beautiful game, I think, due to all those exceptions to the guidelines, not due to the guidelines, because otherwise you could just learn all the guidelines by heart and it would be a test and you would know the guidelines and you would be the best in the world. No, that would be not very interesting, of course. then the one with the best memory would win. This would not be a very interesting competition. No, the interesting things are not the guidelines. Almost all good, or all players know those guidelines. But the real art, of course, is not learning the guidelines by heart. The real art is to develop an intuition for the exceptions and, of course, to calculate the necessary variations in the given specific concrete positions. Okay, so c4 would be a big blunder, and this would be a non-trivial exception to the guideline. But in the game, of course, Oms, Palace, Salgado Lopez, Barcelona 2011, Black, of course, didn't commit that blunder and played King C6, and now the King starts its long march as given here. It may take, of course, a lot of time maneuvering in such situations, but usually now the pawns win. And a typical weapon is to use Zugzwang. Yeah, and here's the first moment. The bishop must protect two diagonals, and now, the bishop cannot move, and the king, is also optimally placed. So white has to make a concession. And which kind of concessions he makes? Black uses it. The king left the best square, and black has invaded, breaking this line of resistance and then winning, as the pawn cannot be taken. Okay. And after bishop f2, black's king continues the long march. White's king now must either allow king b3 or king b1. So it's not so difficult after all. It's only long, but not so difficult. The next line of defense is, of course, again broken by Zugzwang. The king continues the march. The king marches in. And it's over. And so Oms Palace resigned. After king c3, there's just king e2, king f1, winning the bishop first and the game later. And after king e3, the c-pawn wins immediately. It's not on one of the same diagonal. The bishop is torn apart, and black wins. So, the guideline is, if in such material constellations the two passed pawns are only 2 files or less apart, then the defender usually draws. The big exception are 2 bishop's pawns, a c and an f pawn, which cannot be stopped on one and the same diagonal. They win. And if the 2 passed pawns are 3 files apart or more, then the attacker usually wins. If it's not one wrong rook's pawn, which can be stopped by the king, or if it's not one of the non-trivial exceptions where the attacker is very unfortunately placed. But this is the usual case in point. The attacker usually wins, but it can take quite a lot of time for the king to invade. Their long marches might be necessary. But usually the attacker should win in those cases.